Yo, what's up guys, it's LOZA, and today we're looking at Dark Magician fusions. Which ones are good and which ones are bad? I think we all secretly know the answers, but let's put them on the tier list and explain which ones are truly crucial to a deck build and which ones are probably best left for your casual build. Now we're going to go from left to right here, and you'll see I've kind of ordered them on their release date more or less. It might be a little inconsistent, but it's more or less their release date. So we've got S all the way to F tier, and we're going to start with the Dark Paladin. Now, where do you think the Dark Paladin should fit in? Well, he is the Dark Paladin, and you know what? His effect on the field is actually quite good. Now, the main reason I'm going to put him as D tier is because while he's on the field, he's actually quite good, but summoning him is another story. You need to basically have Eye of Timaeus, because there's no way you are playing Buster Blader in your Dark Magician deck, okay? Dark Magician's already bricky enough. Adding in Buster Blader does not help with anything, unless we get a card in future that somehow identifies as any material similar to that of Eye of Timaeus, but hey, maybe searchable this time and, you know, able to be grabbed off Circle and Rod. So Dark Paladin's effect on the field, however, is quite good. His effect on the field allows us to discard a card to negate an opponent's spell effect. That's pretty good considering it's not once per turn, so you can just keep doing this. He also has the effect to gain 500 attack and defense for each for each dragon monster your opponent has on field or grave. Now that can be quite good. You can make this guy quite massive, and obviously you can beat down any Blue Eyes player with this fella, or Dragon Link player. So I think he sits perfectly in the D tier, and we may realign these as we go through the video, but I think that's a great spot for him to begin. Next we have the Dark Flare Knight, and I think this is going to be our first one in the F tier. It's just really bad, guys. It's one of my favorite Dark Magician fusions for context, but it just doesn't do anything. Like, it can't be destroyed by battle, and you need to summon it off the Flame Swordsman, which is a fusion, mind you, and Dark Magician. So you need to use, like, Instant Fusion or Retort Fusion, Ready Fusion to summon out Flame Swordsman. Then you need to Magician Souls out Dark Magician. Then you need to Secrets or Poly. And then you make this. And what does it do? Well, besides not being able to be... it can be destroyed by battle. You don't take battle damage from its battles. After it is destroyed, you get to summon Mirage Knight out of the deck. So it's kind of a package deal with Mirage Knight. I know it's not necessarily a fusion, but these cards kind of go together. So Mirage Knight, the Banana Knight, comes out after Dark Flare Knight is destroyed, and Mirage Knight basically lets you trade into any monster, gaining that monster's attack. So you can always win the battle, whether it's a 5,000 attack monster or a 6,000 attack monster, you can gain its attack, beat over it. But then at the end phase, this card banishes itself. I'm pretty sure it's bizarre. Anyway, these cards are way too overbalanced, so Dark Flare Knight and Mirage Knight are you just wouldn't play them. They're very fun, they're very cool, they're very anime, but sadly they have no place in the Dark Magician deck. Alright, getting on to the next fusion, Amulet Dragon. I think Amulet should probably sit in E as well. D tier, sorry, rather as well. Because it does have a niche. In the Sky Striker matchup, if you summon Amulet Dragon and you banish all your opponent's spells, it can be quite beneficial. But you have to remember that they have Widow Anchor and probably Impermanent Effect Veiler that can just say no. But if this card does resolve, it's quite effective. Amulet Dragon's a very old Dark Magician fusion, one of the early ones. So, you know, for its time, it was considered not even good then. But you can see how the effect relates more to an earlier form of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where on being destroyed, it summons a spellcaster from grave. So that recursion was kind of crazy for Dark Magician back then. But once again, to summon this, you needed Eye of Timaeus and a Dark Magician, more or less, unless you were fusing with the Dragon, which is just kind of not really that efficient. Not really very good for card advantage if you use a Poly or a Secrets and a Dragon and a Dark Magician to make this, you're kind of losing the game. Now, one of the main reasons Amulet Dragon, I might even bump it down to E because of this reason. One of the main reasons Amulet Dragon is so bad now is because it's material. Its material being a dragon and a Dark Magician. There is 1, 2, 3 other cards that have more or less the exact same requirements. A Dark Magician and a Dragon, or a Dark Magician Effect Dragon. And they're just better cards. And we'll get to those as we move through the fusions. But I think a lot of you know what I'm talking about. Your Dragoon, your Dragon Knights. They're just a lot better than this card. And this card's a little bit dated, sadly. That alone is going to make me bump this card down to E. Because, yeah, it's just been outclassed by the other Dragon fusions. Speaking of one of them, Dark Magician, the Dragon Knight, I'm going to go ahead and put this card in the A tier, and that might be a bit generous, but this card, along with Circle and Eternal Soul, of course, provides the Dark Magician Triangle Lock, which means you pretty much have it's not an unbreakable board, you still lose the evenly match and non-targeting shuffles and things like that. But it's quite a good and oppressive board, and for a deck that's so rogue, this is, if you can establish this board, which mind you is very difficult to do, it's very good. The problem with this combo is we do have a 2-card combo that lets you make this using Rod and Souls. You can make Dragon Knight, but that means your Rod Search in that combo gets Soul Servant instead of getting Circle or Eternal Soul, that piece you're missing of the triangle. So there's still a bit too many pieces you need for this Dragon Knight to be oppressive. It really needs Eternal Soul, and a bonus is Circle. I'll say Eternal Soul is essential. We can just keep bringing it out and being unaffected and protecting your back row. Circle obviously makes it so you get that Banish as well. So yeah, definitely one of the more crucial Dark Magician cards when you've got all the pieces. But on its own, like, if you have no good back row and you make this, what are you protecting? Like, what are you doing? It's basically a 3k vanilla at that point. So yeah, Dragon Knight is of course such a unique card that it can protect your back row from targeting and destruction. But remember, it doesn't play around things like non-targeting banishes, board wipes that don't care like evenly, and special shuffles like Avramax, stuff like that. So yeah, once again, one of the better DM fusions. We just need an easier way to summon them, and that will be the case for a lot of these fusions that aren't Dragoon. We just need an easier way to summon them. So let's get to Dark Magician Girl, the Dragon Knight, which, you know what, it might seem a bit of copium. She's definitely a B or a C tier. I think I gotta say C tier. Now, the unique thing about Dark Magician Girl, the Dragon Knight, is she's actually a quick effect. Yeah, a quick effect. Discard a card to destroy a monster on the field. That's actually pretty good. It's actually a better effect than pretty much everything underneath it. Dark Paladin is probably a better effect, but once again, its summoning requirements are so ridiculous that we're going to put it in D tier. So Dark Magician Girl, obviously you need to be playing Dark Magician Girl and either then Eye of Timaeus on her. So Magician Souls and Eye of Timaeus can make this, or the roundabout way would be Secrets of Dark Magic, DMG, and a dragon of some form. But you know, it's doable. It's doable. It's much more doable than Dark Paladin. Dark Paladin, by the way. Dark Paladin, Dark Flare Knight, and such. They're either bad or they're very hard to summon, like Buster Blader here, the Dark Paladin here, sorry. Okay, let's move on to the next one, Dark Cavalry. Now, this is one I truly think could belong in A, potentially B. This card absolutely destroys Duel Links. Those of you who've played Duel Links would know, when this card debuted on Duel Links, people were making turbo decks for Dark Cavalry because it's actually quite an oppressive card. Piercing, battle damage, the ability to discard a card, negate anything that targets, which in Duel Links, you know, targeting is very popular still in Duel Links, and that not being once per turn. So it kind of reminds me of Dark Paladin, having that discard a card to negate something that's not once per turn, except instead of a spell this time, it's for targeting. And normally, you know, they're trying to target that Eternal Soul. So a kind of a card that's trying to protect your back row once again, or just your other stuff, which is really cool. This card also gains attack and defense for all the spell traps in the grave. So actually, whenever you summon it in Duel Links, it normally comes out around 3,200-ish at least, which is quite a respectable number. Unfortunately, in the TCG, it's just not very good, and it's just like, there's just better cards, right? As we've mentioned earlier, you can summon other fusions easier, and it just comes back to this card's requirement is a Dark Magician and a Warrior. Once again, our other friend with the Warriors down here. I still think this card, maybe I'm being a bit too nice to it, it's probably a C tier along with the Dark Magician Girl, the Dragon Knight. Could argue that both of these are kind of on the same level. If I'm being honest, it's probably that. It's probably that. Let's go with that, strictly because, like, having to fuse with a Warrior once again without Eye of Timaeus, which is once again unsearchable. There's no in-archetype way to do this, and that's really, really bad. There's not even like a generic Link 1 Warrior we can use or anything like that. So kind of just throw this card out the window. You normally aren't going to make it in your build. But let's move on to the next fusion. This is the Dark Magicians, a very solid average B tier fusion, I would say. And the reason for that is, it's the most easy one to make, needing just Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl and a Spellcaster, so very generic, but still having a lot of issues. Now, I think a lot of people are with me on this take. This card should either be a contact fusion with Dark Magician and DMG or any other Spellcaster, so not requiring secrets or anything else, because, you know, requiring one brick and something else is already quite a steep cost. The other thing is, once you make this card, you've normally used 3 cards, right? DM, Spellcaster, and Secrets, for example. You then get to draw a card if you use another spell or trap. That is so problematic because, like, you've already used 3 cards to get here. Now, to get your value off this card, you need to activate a 4th card. Your Soul Servant here is normally a pretty good target for this, or your Circle or Salvation. But, like, you have to have that 4th spell then, or 4th card that is a spell, rather, to just get a draw 1. So you've used 3 cards and then used a 4th card to get a draw 1. Like, a lot of people say this card generates infinite value. It really doesn't. The amount of energy and resources you put into getting it out means you're not really getting much plus on it. If this card made you go plus, I'd be like, oh yeah, we should all play it, it's amazing. It doesn't really ever make you go plus. You're lucky to go even. You're lucky to go even because, once again, unless you're using Dark Magician and Eye of Timaeus, or Dark Magician Girl and Eye of Timaeus, which is 2-card combo, it still is bad, right? You're still going lose 2 cards. You need to play a 3rd card there, being a spell once again, and then you generate the free draw. Then it almost seems worth it, right? If there was a contact fusion, as I mentioned, a contact fusion way to make this card, that would make this card way more viable. Another nitpicky thing a lot of people agree with me on, and let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. The Dark Magicians is called the Dark Magicians, and if we look at the art, it's Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl. So why doesn't the card identify as Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl? Because we forgot to mention this with Dragonite. Dragonite identifies as Dark Magician on the field and the graveyard. Why couldn't the literal card called The Dark Magicians, which shows Dark Magician and DMG in more futuristic outfits, slightly more attack and defense, why does that card either not have an easy way to summon it because it should be like a contact fusion, or why does the card not identify as the two materials, or at least one of the materials, or at least get the name of the material? I don't know. There's a lot of options there. You know, Red Eyes Fusion makes its fusion monster identify as Red Eyes, so that could have been an option. Maybe with Secrets, making the fusion identify as Dark Magician. That would make Secrets a whole lot better. Oh boy, that would make all the other fusions a lot better too. Now, one thing I'd like to mention about this card is when it is destroyed, you get to summon out Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl from hand, deck, grave. Would have been nice if that was removal of any kind, because you'll find a lot of people will read the card and go, oh cool, Unicorn Shuffle, you know? People will play around it. Anyone with a brain will read the card and go, okay, so just don't destroy it and you don't summon the two vanillas. Great. Or they just will. They will destroy it because, you know, you're summoning two vanillas. And let's be real, summoning Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl off turn as an interaction is not really an interaction. You might save yourself from losing, you know, in the battle phase, maybe, if you're lucky. A lot of the time, if the Dark Magician's effect to float is being, like, beneficial, you're either, like, kind of winning that game anyway, like your opponent really has nothing, or your opponent just didn't read, right? So it's not good conditions for that effect to be under. I'm not trying to complain. I just have so much to analyze on this card and so much that could have been better. Like, compare it to, say, Thunder Dragon Colossus, which that card is a contact fusion when you've used a Thunder Monster's effect that turn. And the more we compare this to other fusions, the sadder we're going to get, so I'm just going to stop with that comparison. But you guys get what I mean, right? Let me know in the comments about the Dark Magician's rant, because yeah, this card really missed the mark for me, and it continues to do so. Now, I will mention in the battle phase, if you swing with Dark Magician, you swing with Rod, you can then, of course, use your Secrets in the battle phase, go into Dark Magician, get a bit of extra damage, push for some lethal, potentially. That is nice, but that's more, this card being generic. As I mentioned earlier, some of the cards lower on the list are really hard to summon because they need DM and a Warrior, DM and Buster Blader. This needs DM and a Spellcaster. We're gonna have that. We always have that, right? So it's quite generic, and that is what makes this card very playable in a DM deck, just how easy it is to, well, the requirements being easy. It's still not easy on the cards in hand when you make it. Using 3 cards to make this feels very bad. Normally, if you're using 3 cards to make a boss monster, you want it to do something. You want it to have a negate, you want it to be a floodgate, you want it to have some sort of good effect, and sadly, this one just draws you cards. Which, you know what, if it did it on summon, maybe it would be better, but it doesn't. Anyway, that's enough about the Dark Magicians. It's not moving higher than the B tier, and you know what, I could for spite put it in C, but I do think it's still a little bit better than these cards, purely because it's easier to summon. I think effect-wise, these 2 cards might actually be better. However, we're going to leave it in B tier due to how generic it is and how pretty much every Dark Magician list, whether it's Master Duel, TCG, OCG, you play this card, right? These ones are like, maybe text. This one is always in a list. It's just that, like, generic. So, you know what, for that reason alone, it will stay in the B tier. Oh, we've made it. We've made it to the big boy. I'm pretty sure everyone knew where this was going. Dragoon will always be the best Dark Magician fusion, and unfortunately will make every fusion afterwards, which we're getting to very soon, feel terrible by comparison. And you know, that's no fault of anyone other than Konami for making this card so oppressive. I know there's people who will not play Dragoon because it's that powerful. I know there's people who, you know, despise Dragoon in their DM deck, say it's not a DM card. They say all sorts of blasphemous things. Guys, I'm just going to be real with you. Dragoon is a Dark Magician card. It literally starts by saying fusion of Dark Magician and Red Eyes. It's a symbol of Yugi and Joey's friendship, and like, what more is there to say? Red Eyes Dark Dragoon is, without a doubt, the most powerful fusion card Dark Magician will ever receive, in my opinion. For starters, it has 3,000 attack and 2,500 defense, which is already better than a majority of them. But that's not where it finishes. There's a lot of lines of text here. It is, of course, a negate, an omni-negate. Discard a card to negate anything in the game. So it feels like an upgraded version of Dark Paladin, and if you look at their looks, they look very similar too. So I do really feel this is just Dark Paladin kind of mixed with Red Eyes. But anyway, or incorporated Red Eyes as an armor. Anyway, it's got the same weapon too. But before we go into that, people people who love Dark Paladin, you should love Dragoon. Anyway, also, besides the Omni Negate, it gains 1,000 attack if you destroy the card that you negate. So if it's a card in the hand activating, card in the field activating, you gain 1,000 permanently on top of that. So you go to 4k for your first negate. Now, unlike Dark Paladin and unlike Cavalry, this effect is only once per turn. And thank God it is, because if it wasn't, it would be way too absurd. So yes, you have a once per turn Omni Negate, which is sensational and boosts you by 1,000 if you negate something. So if you negate something in the grave or banish zone, you do not gain the 1,000 because they did not get destroyed, right? That makes sense? Fantastic. Next, we've also got the bonus effect where, due to how it was summoned, if it was summoned with vanillas, so if you summon it with Red Eyes and DM, the vanillas, you have two pops. So you go activate effect to pop. Your opponent can then respond. If your opponent doesn't respond, you then just say, this card is now destroyed, and you burn for its attack. They cannot respond to that. You do not target. It is non-targeting destruction. You don't even have to tell your opponent which one you want to go for. Let's say your opponent has 3 monsters on the field. You say, I would like to activate my effect to pop, and they say, okay. And you go, I'd like to pop your Red Eyes. And they say, I'll chain this in response. No, you cannot. You can chain to me using the pop, me saying, I want to use the pop. And that's the best thing, because you say, I'm using the pop. They'll chain a bunch of stuff to like move their monsters around. And you're like, cool, on resolution, I'll pop this one. So you never have to target with the pop. Please don't get baited by that, or please don't let your opponent be like, oh, well, I chained this to protect it. No. I get to pick what I pop. You don't get any say. It's very, very good, because it's non-targeting, and you do not have to declare anything other than, I'm using the effect to pop. How would you like to respond? That's all you have to say. You can do that twice if you have the 2 vanillas once again. So if you use Red Eyes Fusion, or a world where Anaconda is legal again, Anaconda sends Red Eyes Fusion, you summon Dragoon, and you use Red Eyes and Dark Magician, the vanillas, you have 2 pops. So normally if you do those 2 pops and you negate a card on that same turn, you have popped 2 of your opponent's monsters and burnt them, you've negated and gone to 4k, you can normally go to the battle phase and swing for game. It is that oppressive. I really love it. It is a sensational card to make a otherwise very casual archetype really strong and like a meta contender. Unfortunately, we lost things like Anaconda to make this card easily accessible in our deck. Of course, that means other decks lost that easy access as well. You know, I could talk about Dragoon all day, but basically, I still think Anaconda was better for us than them. What I do hope for in future is a card that pretty much lets us get out our fusions, even if it only got out everything below S tier. Well, I should leave that up there. Even if it got everything in, you know, below S tier, and it could turbo that out for 1 or 2 cards in DM, amazing. I'd love that fusion spell or link or whatever it is. I understand if they're scared of making Dragoon, you know, easy to access in the deck. That's fine. If they want to make it harder to access for more of a turn 2 or 3 play, I'm fine with that. As long as we get that fusion spell, that'd be really nice. But ultimately, Dragoon is what we have for now. That is the most oppressive, powerful boss monster we can make. And we really need to play our deck so that we can turbo it out every game and every turn. If you're not trying to make Dragoon in your turn, like, what are you doing? The main reason you wouldn't want to make Dragoon is if you have Circle and Eternal Soul, and you're like, well, Dragon Knight Lock here might be better. If you know you're in a matchup where Dragon Knight is actually better, great, you can go for that. 9 times out of 10 though, Dragoon is just better and it needs the same material. Remember we had this conversation earlier talking about Amulet Dragon? Well, these are the dragon counterparts we're talking about. Dark Magician and an Effect Dragon, or Red Eyes, right? So this card is so generic, it can be any Effect Dragon, great, or just Dark Magician. Like, obviously if it's Red Eyes it's peak, but obviously that's a brick, so it's up to you whether you play it, or if you're playing Ref, you kind of have to. Dark Magician and a Dragon. Dark Magician and the Dragon Knight, so generic, just and a Dragon. Amulet Dragon is the same, Dark Magician and a Dragon. So all of these pretty much have the same cost, you know, they just want DM and a Dragon. Yes, Dragoon wants an effect, come on, who cares? You're going to play Effect Dragons. So, you see what I'm saying? Like, if you have Secrets and a Dragon and Dark Magician, like, do you want to summon Amulet Dragon when you could summon Dragoon? No, you do not. If you're versing Sky Striker, even if Amulet Dragon's good, you're probably better off with Dragoon. Because you know what? They can't Widow Anchor Dragoon. They can't Imperm Dragoon. And, yeah, look, they can TTT, steal it, and all fun stuff like droplets and whatnot, but you can't play around that unless you have Village. So, ultimately, if you can establish Dragoon against Sky Striker, you're in a good spot. Or most meta decks, if you can establish Dragoon and Village, you're in a really good spot. Because once again, Village helps counteract a lot of Dragoon's weaknesses. Dragoon loses to stuff like Super Polymerization, Triple Tactics Talents, Droplets, Dark Ruler no more. The list goes on. Dragoon can just say, hey, I can negate one thing, but you know, after that, that's it. So Village helps you just go, hey, none of those things that counter me, and you've got your one negate still. It's very, very oppressive. If you combo this with something like the Nadir Engine to get Wind out, it's sensational. Anyway, getting a bit off topic and a bit excited about Dragoon. The last thing I'll say about Dragoon is it does also lose to a Kaiju, so there is definitely so many counter picks and counter plays to Dragoon now. Even Ultimate Slayer outs Dragoon, right? So people who are like Dragoon deniers think Dragoon's too strong. It's really not anymore. It's really 2024 Yu-Gi-Oh! There's so many decks that are super oppressive and don't care about Dragoon now. So yes, there is certain decks you'll just win for free. And you know what? Dark Magician needs that. And if you don't think so, like, I don't know, man. Have you seen what the deck tries to do? It tries to achieve 1 banish off turn. That's it. But I do think Dragoon is exactly what the deck needed. A super powerful god boss monster that helps the deck not be terrible. It helps the deck be less of a joke. You know when you're that guy at locals who plays DM and everyone's like, oh cool, I got the DM guy, I got the free win. Dragoon kind of is that card that says, I ain't the free win anymore, you know? I'm activating ref, I'm popping 2, I'm swinging for game. Oh, you bricked up, too bad, buddy. Like, Dragoon just lets you play your deck in an oppressive manner that says, if you don't have Ash, I kind of win. But anyway, once again, Dragoon rant ended. Oh boy. Well, the Dragoon rant doesn't really end because we have to talk about these next 2 fusions. Now, one of the problems Dragoon has made is that every fusion we're going to get after it is inherently just trash. Like, to be blank. To be frank, to be blunt, they're just going to be worse. I'm going to bring up Master of Chaos here. And the reason, I think it's slightly better than Dark Magicians, but it's definitely not as generic. Master of Chaos can help you OTK going second, and it's not in the way you may think. A lot of people read Master of Chaos and say, oh, great, you make it with Dark Magician and Chaos Monster, which don't use BLS, please, just use Illusion of Chaos. So DM and Illusion of Chaos, go into this, and then what do you do from there? Well, you get to summon something back. Great, you can summon back the Dark Magician you used to fuse with. Great, so that's a lot of damage, we'll talk about that in a bit. But mainly people go, oh, well now if you had Rod on the field, link Rod into Artemis, you can go Master of Chaos, banish, destroy, Tribute Dark Magician in the Artemis, and now you can get a board wipe, right? Banish the opponent's board. Okay, if that was a quick effect, I think this card could be A tier, maybe even S tier. But it's not a quick effect. So that makes this card pretty bad at clearing boards, because you need 3 cards to go into it, and then you need to tribute a light in the dark, which can be a little finicky sometimes. Yes, we do have lights, but outside of Timaeus and Artemis, there's not a lot of lights in the deck. The Master of Chaos getting the banish can be actually a bit annoying. Plus, you're tributing 2 of your monsters, so even if you banish the field, what are you going to swing with now? You're left with not a lot to swing with after that to, go for the game. Sometimes that banish is very good, though. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes you do that banish and it wins you the game, right? If you banish the crucial pieces. However, banish is not so bad anymore. A lot of decks can play with their banish, like Brandon, for example. They don't care. Brandon's like, oh, you banished it? Cool, no worries. Brandon Fusion. So just remember that banish is not necessarily bad nowadays. There's a lot of decks that don't care. However, there is definitely matchups where this can be absolutely phenomenal. However, that's going to be your 1 in 20 games, for example. Now, the main use of Master of Chaos is actually Illusion of Chaos in hand goes and grabs you Rod or Souls, whichever you're missing. Normal Rod gets secrets. Soul summons Dark Magician. Battle phase, Rod swings, Dark Magician swings. Secrets of Dark Magic lets you fuse Dark Magician and the Illusion of Chaos in your hand into Master of Chaos. Master of Chaos pulls the Dark Magician from the grave, back out to the field. Swing with Master of Chaos for 3k, swing with Dark Magician for 25. Altogether, that is... I forget the math, so let's just do it together. So you swung with your Rod, you swing with Dark Magician, you're going to activate Secrets from here and summon Master of Chaos, so you're going to add 3,000 onto that, and Master of Chaos summons out Dark Magician, which is another 25. So altogether, it's 9,600 damage thanks to Master of Chaos. So on an empty board, let's say you go second and you go Lightning Storm Regeki or a bunch of stuff like that, Droplet and shenanigans, and you out their board. You can literally go for game with Rod and Illusion of Chaos, right? Rod and Illusion of Chaos can get you game on an open board, which is a really good thing to know if you're playing Master Duel or anything else. Super sensational. I have some videos on it if you have no idea what I'm talking about. Anyway, I think Master of Chaos does fit a nice niche in the deck, but once again, because we had Dragoon and then we got Master of Chaos, I was really like, wow, this card is really not great. Mainly because you just don't summon it that much. A lot of the time, if you're making a fusion, you're making Dragoon, right? So it does suffer from the problem of all my other fusions are just kind of better than me, but it's mainly just Dragoon. It's mainly just Dragoon is better than me. And it does need to use Illusion of Chaos in hand, which you normally want to keep it in your hand, so it can be a little weird. You normally only want to do this if you're pushing for game. But anyway, it is a good addition to the deck. The standard Dark Magician extra deck, fusions, looks like these 4 here. This L right here, this LOZA L right here. If you were to look up a LOZA profile, it would probably have Dragoon at 2, 1 Dragon Knight, 1 Master of Chaos, 1 Dark Magicians. That would probably be the extra deck, you know, of a LOZA profile you would see, or most DM profiles I would say, that would be the extra deck. Anything below that is really unnecessary, and that's why these are in S, A, and B, for that very reason. Now, Dragonite without Circle and Eternal Soul, I'd even argue, goes down to B, so take that with a grain of salt. I'm going to put it in A, purely because its high roll, if you have Circle Eternal Soul, is kind of crazy. It can be. Then every time I pull this off, by the way, I get even leads. So just take it with a grain of salt. I don't know why. Every time you establish Circle Eternal Soul Dragonite, and you're like, I finally pulled it off. Barely happens, but I have the lock. They're just like, oh, evenly? And you're like, cool, man. So maybe they should make this card more accessible, easier to summon, the way Dragoon can be summoned off one card. Anyway, the last fusion. Oh, man. So this is, once again, a Dark Magician and a Dragon, much like Dragoon, Dragonite, and Amulet Dragon. Where do you think this card sits? Have a little second to think where I'm going to put it. Have you thought about it? I think it's got to be C or D. It's got to be C or D. Maybe it has to be purely with the other Gaia fusion, because it does some of the Gaia stuff as well, but it does have a floating effect. So let's get into it. Dark Magician and Magical Dragonite. Somehow the Magical Dragonite is worse than the regular Dragonite. Let's also notice that Dark Magician just keeps stealing Gaia the Dragon Champion's rides, huh? He really do. This card has Piercing, much like Dark Cavalry, so they seem to keep that as a Gaia theme effect. This card also has a unique effect where the first monster you destroy, you can actually burn your opponent for its attack. So kind of similar to half of a Dragoon effect. I know this is from the Gaia archetype though, so that's a Gaia thing, I understand that. But I'm just saying, you know, it's kind of similar to Dragoon, but once again, way worse. Now, once again, that's only on the first monster you destroy. And once again, this does Piercing, which is great. And once again, Dragoon just pops 2 and then can swing. But anyway, this card also has the effect where when it's destroyed, you can summon out Vanilla Dark Magician and Vanilla Gaia the Dragon Champ. Yes, so you have to spend one of your extra deck slots on Gaia the Dragon Champ. Now, this effect is actually quite good. The main problem is, same with Dark Magicians, like both these cards have this issue. There's no way for us to pop them in the battle phase. If there was a way to pop the Dark Magicians or Dark Magician the Magical Dragon Knight in the battle phase and get the value, that would be amazing. Think of the OTK potential of normal summoning Rod and soul summoning Dark Magician, swinging Rod in for 16, swinging Dark, like, let's do the math. Okay, we're just gonna do a little bit of quick maths to add up how much damage Dark Magicians could do if there was a way to pop it in the battle phase, like if it popped itself. Same goes for this card, it will be slightly different numbers, but you'll get a really good idea of what I'm saying. Dark Magicians does this a little bit better, which is another reason why I'm putting it a little bit higher. So we're going to assume we have Rod on field and Dark Magician on field. So 1600 plus the 25 for Rod and Dark Magician. That will be 4100. We're then going to add on to that 2800 because we've now activated Secrets fused into the Dark Magicians. This is going to give us 6900. Nice. But we're not done there, because we have some sort of effect, whether it's a third card or Dark Magician's Errata, where they pop itself to summon DM and DMG. So now we're going to plus onto that another 2500, which gives us 94, plus Dark Magician Girl's 2000 attack, but in this case, we've summoned a second DM, so there should be one in the grave, so she should be 23. It's 11,700. Like, that is game into, like, you know, a fair bit of monsters even on the field in attack mode. So it's interesting to think about that. Sometimes I really think about how we're so close to having a nice OTK. If the Dragon Knight and or the Dark Magicians both just had a way to pop themselves in the battle phase, that would be sensational and we could get that value. Now, of course, Dark Magician summons a vanilla Dragon Champion as well as DM, and they're both level 7, so you could even, in this case, let's grab the calculator back. We're just going to do it strictly off this card. But this guy's got 2900 attack. That's a pretty good start, but imagine he can pop himself, and then he can turn that into 25 more, and how much is Gaia the Dragon Champ? Gaia Dragon Champ is 26? Alright. We're going to plus that by 26. That gives you exact lethal. That's kind of crazy. See, those numbers, it's Konami's a bit sussy on those numbers. The fact that that's exact lethal is kind of cool. Now, of course, from here, you can overlay into Flare Metal, because you have Gaia the Dragon Champ and DM on the field, and just burn your opponent for any excess damage too, if you just missed the lethal by a little bit too. So how good is that? That actually sounds really nice. It is just a shame that Dark Magician, the Magical Dragonite, and Dark Magicians just don't have an efficient way to pop themselves. Obviously, popping Eternal Soul could be a nice way to do this. Maybe they need to give us that. Maybe Eternal Soul popping our own field needs to be implemented into this combo for the OTK. But once again, what, are we going to play MST? Probably not. Anyway, that is the end of the Dark Magician fusions. video. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while because, man, we have a lot of fusions that are just unplayable, and that's sadly because of having similar fusion material requirements, or being power crept by just better versions of themselves, or just simply existing after Dragoon, so, you know, feeling very, very subpar in comparison. But thank you to all of those who've made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And a big thank you to all of our members, people who donate, and people who watch the live streams. You guys are sensational. Shout out to Got Any Grapes, my #1 donator. You're an absolute king, and you really keep this channel going. Anyway, thanks everybody. I'll catch you guys on the next Dark Magician video.